Rise, warrior.
Nothing can stand in the face of this.
What is Kingdom Under Fire 2? Set to release in November of this year. Is it an MMO? Is it an RTS? Is it a third-person RPG? That's what we're here to find out. I've been waiting a very long time for an MMO to mesh these genres together, and now it's finally time to see if Kingdom can deliver. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Kingdom Under Fire 2 is an MMO real-time strategy developed by Blueside and Phantagram. Now this is a game that's been seemingly on and off of development since about 2008 or 9. There's not a whole lot of information about this title, and rightly so because a lot of the events of this game's overall history took place on the eastern part of the world. So of course we're not going to know that much about it. But what we do know is that the game has been shut down in multiple regions. I've taken it upon myself to attempt and briefly research as to why. It's of course, as you'd expect, not 100% clear, but I can at least give my opinion on what I think ultimately happened here if we're going to speculate. We do know in these previous versions that they did feature a monetization model that was, for lack of better words, mostly, if not completely pay to win. At least that's how it's considered by us. Something to note is that what our markets consider to be unacceptable right now was much different than what the eastern region saw as something they could not handle. Korea specifically, a region this game was reportedly published in, is known for being more tolerable when it comes to games with pay to progress or pay to win mechanics. And it was reported that this game was set to touch down in Korea for about 2013 to 2014's area. But just like in Russia, I'm betting that the game never really made it out of its testing phases. And I'd imagine that the cash shop had very little to do with it compared to the rest. So in my analysis, I believe that it could have been these key factors: the optimization, the gameplay, and the development. I would like to go ahead and label this as a game that was ultimately ahead of its time. If we took a look at what MMOs in the past 20 years or so actually meshed the genres together of action and real-time strategy, there would be one big problem. There are none. Or none that are left alive in the slightest at least. Just imagine if you had a title like Total War that allowed you to take control of your troops on the battlefield and manage the outcome through strategy, but you could also jump down into a mountain blade-like view and fight alongside them in the heat of war. The thought of that has always been absolutely amazing to me, and so far there's only been a few games that have even attempted that, and some can be found in early access on Steam, but in very early stages of development and single player. Titles like Rainfall or Cellsort's Ashen Company are a few examples, but one that I would call most notable would be Wars and Warriors Joan of Arc. A title like the others and Kingdom Under Fire 2 allowed you to go down into the top-down RTS view and command your army alongside being able to fight with them in third person. All of this is exactly why I'm so ready to play this game, and my only wish is that it didn't have such a bad reputation, because the idea and the game itself deserve to flourish. It would be awesome to see even more of this type. I'm sure it would develop a niche that most of us didn't even know we needed. Now to continue on the first topic, it was reported during the time of release in Korea, and I'd imagine most parts of the world, there wasn't exactly a lot of proper hardware for running this game. Keep in mind that this was before Black Desert, so around this time most of us were rocking Windows 7 or Vista on our computers, and maybe even Windows XP in some cases, with pretty baseline graphics cards. Of course, most computers these days, around $800 to $1,000, will probably get you a semi-decent to a very decent rig depending on how it's built. And something like that, you could probably run this game on at least medium to high settings with no issues. This means that back then a lot of players did not have that luxury though, especially in Southern Korea. I think that comboed with the fact that this game must have had some pretty serious optimization issues early on, judging from the gameplay. I mean, you're talking about literally hundreds of units on the battlefield at once in an online setting, with players interacting in third person and casting special skills all around. That by itself just sounds like the perfect recipe for lag. So I think the entirety of the versions released in Asia suffered from this issue mainly. I think that in the game's very early development, due to its optimization, demanding hardware limitations, and bugs, that it just never made it out of the gate in that part of the world during that time. But the next versions are a little tricky to guess on. Some would describe the ones in China, Russia, and even Southeast Asia to be temporary tests, which I think could be true as well, but if we're talking about what's been heard in regards to this, let's discuss this now. And this part was mostly talked about on the Discord itself. However, I did see a few mentions that allegedly the developers did not like what the publisher was doing with the monetization model, or that there were disagreements between the two. Or maybe it could have been both. But one thing that does make sense is shutting down the Russian server in favor of the global NA and EU release. Since a lot of players from Russia have the possibility of coming to the EU server anyway, if they're trying to conserve as much money as possible and aren't making that much in the part of the world, it only stands to reason that you should put all of your eggs in one basket rather than having them scattered throughout. Plus, usually when there's a multiple publisher situation, region locks become a common thing. So if there was a Russian server and an EU server but a region lock on both, they would just lose out on players overall. The gaming community is so scattered as it is, and having games that continually release in other regions until they're worldwide isn't as common as it used to be. In terms of optimization and the development, there have been multiple different versions of the game during its time with numerous improvements to its optimization. Some of the gameplay elements have changed since its first iteration, but overall the goal of the game has always remained close to, if not the same. Development has hit a couple of gaps along the way, but this is the title they've been working on for the past 9 to 10 years. The teams Blueside and Phantagram seem to have this one as their main focus, because aside from the Kingdom Under Fire games, there's only about a handful of other games that they've worked on, and the majority of them seem to be on Phantagram's side, which has to mean that they must be pooling the majority of their developers and resources all into this game, if not most, to try and deliver a great product. I do have to say that I both admire and think it deserves praise that these developers have dedicated so much effort and money to the game for such a long time. Most developers probably would have given up in about half the time. Around 2013, the producer and director of the game, Sang-Yeon Lee, hope I'm saying that right, but they had stated that they had been affected by losing about half of their 160-person original team, which means that by that year since they started, they had lost over 80 people and still continued to go another 6 years to reach this release. And that is insane. For Kingdom Under Fire 2, this is a real-time strategy MMO which meshes the gameplay in a top-down view with a third-person action game, like Dynasty Warriors and Total War mixed in one. There are 5 different classes for the game confirmed for our version, featuring the Spellblade, the Archer, the Gunslinger, the Berserker, and the Elementalist. For content of the game, we do have a story mode that features different missions allowing you to learn the game and progress your character to prepare for in-game content. This will more than likely be the most useful thing you do when you get in-game until you reach the point of what's called dailies and region quests. Although there are no dungeons in the game itself, it does have a bit of traditional MMO questing and farming that you can do early on, but the majority of the game's content will be done on the battlefield. This will also include raids, both 8-man and even all the way up to 16-man if we get them. Watching the battles unfold is completely chaotic, although we will have to use strategy to get victory in the end. There will definitely be some very challenging content, I've heard. The 16-man raid in the previous versions was one of the ones that featured a giant dragon at the end. Now the cool feature that's included with in-game content is something that's called Divine Favor, which basically allows you to gain power when you do the content, so starting off we'll probably have a tougher time doing the raids, but over time as we keep trying and trying, we'll eventually become strong enough to clear it. Kind of like the concept of max level raiding in games, instead of repeated attempts until you get the right strategy down, in this scenario you will need strategy and power. For PvP, I'm not fully sure what modes we'll have access to on our version at the launch of the game, but the trailer at least shows us that we'll have access to 1v1 duels and 3v3s on the battlefield. We do also know that guild warfare will be possible on the big map, so if that doesn't open up right away, that should hopefully be available shortly after. In terms of combat, not only can you command your troops and hero from the top-down view, but both yourself and your troops get a variety of different skills, and you yourself have combos that you can use in third-person view as well. It's important to note that there also is a progression system in the game for both your character and your units. For the character, the gear we get can be enhanced and crafted as time goes on, with plus 15 being the max. Keep in mind though that we are always in danger of getting a downgrade. For troops, we can increase their star rating, which does boost their stats until we can get them to the proper grade for leveling them up entirely. This can bring troops from gray to blue to finally purple, and as your troops increase in level, that's when you're actually able to equip skills, which can be upgraded too. Now this will all involve a degree of grind, so in terms of what endgame is what you make of it. But that's all for now about the baseline of what Kingdom Under Fire 2 is. This is a game that's going to be a much needed mix to the genre. Whether it succeeds or fails, if you're a gamer that enjoys RTS and action-based games, I think this time around it could be a perfect fit for you. Especially if you've got nothing else to play for the next few weeks. If you spend $30 and end up spending a few months in game, I would consider that incredibly worth it. For the monetization model of this game, it is buy to play, with the developers tailoring it to us so we won't have to worry about the same pay to win or pay for heavy convenience functions that were in previous iterations. That'll be the next thing we'll talk about for those of you wondering about the cash shop and if this game will be pay to win or not. But in the meantime, thanks so much for watching, and be sure to like and sub if you enjoyed. I'll catch you for the next one. and farewell.